Sally, as we approach the start of the return to learning for many students, there's a dead period for student athletes when it comes to working out. What is the dead period and when does it start, when does it finish?
We're calling it the dead period. It is a time when our student athletes are not able to work with their coaches. We have always said that when we are in remote learning, we are not able to participate in sports. And so we are starting the school year in remote learning, and we do not know when our high school kids are going to be back in the classroom. We're hoping by the end of September. So at this point, we have a dead period during that time because kids will not be in the classroom. They will be at home, remote learning. However, I would like to look at that a little bit more, JP. I think I'm going to go to our athletic directors and see that when we become hybrid, which is right after Labor Day, that maybe we'll be able to take our student athletes and get them to after school to come in and do some work with their coaches, just like we are doing this summer with a lot of, strict guidelines. But we'll see if that's going to happen. But for right now, the first day of school to the end of September, there is a dead period.
A question many students have, with all the changes to the calendar and some sports overlapping a little bit, is there a rule against student athletes competing in multiple sports at the same time?
There is not, and we have talked to the coaches and the athletic directors, and this is the time when our coaches need to work together, that maybe a student athlete is participating in two sports at once. We have a football, basketball, a little bit of an overlap. We have a football, baseball overlap. We have a softball to basketball scenario, or even softball wrestling, that we might have some issues. So at this point we want our student athletes to be able to play every single sport that they want to. So I encourage all the coaches, let's make this work for our student athletes that they can play multi-sports this year.
With a short turnaround from when a sport like soccer begins and when they play their first games, will those athletes be allowed to train or condition, practice before the season begins?
We're working at that right now, and I'm going to go to the commission and we're going to talk about quote-unquote out-of-season guidelines. A lot of things have been changed a little bit this year. As you know, the schedule has changed, moving sports. So we need to work within our bylaws to see what we need to change to make this right for our student athletes. I would like to see that our coaches are able to work with our athletes a little bit more than the 7.5 hours a week. Our coaches have not been with the athletes for so long. So I will take that to the commission and we will talk about and ask them to see, and the board of directors, to see whether we can relax those out-of-season coaching rules.
Is there any update on whether or not you think we'll have fans in the fall and if athletes will have to wear masks when they compete?
We don't know that at this time. We will, day by day, week by week, we will follow the governor's health orders as to mask wearing and whether we're going to be able to have fans in the stands. I would tell you that I will do everything I can to make sure that the parents are able to see their kids play. And if that means parents are wearing masks, that we have temperature checks, ticketless entry, we'll make it work. But I'm so hoping that all our student athletes will be able to look up in the stands and see their parents.
You've recently released the guidelines to coaches and athletic directors what a cross-country meet will look like in this new school year. Can you describe to the student athletes and parents and fans some of those new guidelines?
Our coaches are doing a great job, but we're asking them to give us their recommendation now to how to make this work. The guidelines say basically is you can only have 100 in one area at a time, and that includes workers, coaches, and runners. So when you have 7 running for a team and you have 5 teams, then that's 35 athletes there, but that's boys, and then girls is 70 athletes there, plus all the workers. So really, you're looking at that amount as to how to make this work. But our coaches are coming up with staggered start times, like we're going to run a group of maybe 5 and then send them home, and then we're going to run again. And it's really neat to see, just thinking outside the box to make sure our student athletes are able to compete in cross country.
What about fall golf? What changes have been made and what will a golf event look like?
Well, golf is one of those that they're playing right now. I was watching golf on TV yesterday and it was so neat to see, and that is one sport that we can make sure we do correctly. The main difference, JP, is not going to be able to have shotgun starts. Everything's going to be staggered times. And once they finish the course, then they need to get in the car, on the bus. We're also going to use a digital scoring, I want a maker, which is going to alleviate just looking at the cards and anything, with their hands. So it's going to be, golf is going to work, and we're going to have fall golf, and then we'll have our state championships in the spring.
You mentioned championships. We're still a ways off from state competition, but athletes and coaches want to know about the postseason. How many teams will qualify for state?
At this point, in every single sport, team sports, we're going to have 8 qualify. And that is much less than we've had before. In basketball, we've had 16, and now we're going to cut the field down to 8. In soccer, we had 12, volleyball 12, and we're going to cut it down to 8. Same thing with football. Baseball, softball, down to 8. We're looking at that, and the reason is we have a short amount of time to get in games. And every time you lengthen that field or go to 16 or go to 12, you're adding another week. And we just don't have those weeks. When we're in a 9-10 week period, we have to make sure our state championships, we want to award those trophies, but we have to make sure that we just shrink that a little bit so all our student athletes are able to compete in a good, solid regular season.
Any plans for a fall season in an activity like esports?
We're planning a lot for activities. We're planning a lot virtually, and I just received some information about speech and debate. FFA are doing a really good job with livestock. All our activities are working, and last night I watched the Enchantment Awards, for the theater, and that was really neat to see athletes, and I call them athletes because they are. They are athletes, and they're working on their activity even now during COVID and during this time. And so you asked about esports. We're going to have a fall season for esports. We usually just had a spring season. Well, this year we're going to do a fall season and a spring season. And one thing exciting, JP, and it's just the starting and it's in my head, I would really like to see if we can have a weightlifting, powerlifting type competition for our student athletes this fall, and we can do that virtually. So there are still some things that we can do to make sure our student athletes are engaged while we're in this remote learning or hybrid situation, waiting for all our sports, mostly in January through June.
How has scheduling gone with schools and programs during this ever-changing calendar? What sort of feedback have you gotten?
It's a little bit tough. We have our district schedule, and then it's the others. We're talking about travel, no overnights. So that changes schedules. And we're talking about trying to play more people in our region, so we're not on the buses. And then we have our bordering schools that play, teams from out of state. And moving football and soccer has shifted that because now they're not on the same season as we are. And we don't know what the quarantine guidelines are going to be. So there has been some challenges for our athletic directors, but I assure you that those athletic directors are going to make sure that their student athletes are competing this year.
Lastly, schools are starting to begin remote learning this month. In your opinion, how important is it that athletics and activities soon follow that?
It's so important, JP. I mean, we had a tragedy this weekend of one of our student athletes, and it just goes back and it just reminds us how important our coaches are to be with these student athletes daily, to make sure that kids are on the right path, that our coaches are the extension of parents, and they're the ones that they listen. The social emotional well-being of our student athletes and all our activity kids, it is so vital that we get back into school and we have athletics and activities. 60,000 kids do at least one sport or one activity. That's a lot of kids that we reach. And so the sooner we get kids back in school, the sooner we get kids engaged in all our athletics and all our activities, we're going to help kids. We're going to help their social emotional well-being. So all I ask is that we continue to stay positive, because that's my message out here. We need to stay positive. But we need to do what's right. We need a social distance. We need to wear masks. And I don't want to be out here preaching, but what I look at every single day is these kids. These kids need us. They need our coaches. They need our schools. And we need to play again, New Mexico.